Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. This day we're going to talk about the ban list that's coming up soon. I personally think it's going to be in the beginning of April or middle of April. So I know some other people think it could be May or June, closer to nationals, but I think it's actually going to come sooner than that, especially if they're not happy with the game state right now. So the game state is pretty much filled with a bunch of Fire King, Snake Eyes decks, some Voiceless Voice, some Kashtira, Fluwanderies. So I think that it's still a tier 1 meta. I've never believed that Fire King Snake Eyes or Snake Eyes Pier is a tier 0 deck. I've had no issues or blowouts when it comes to those decks, unless I get hand trapped to death. But that's every single deck, in my opinion. So I don't think there's any unfair dynamic when it comes to Fire King or Snake Eyes. They just have a lot of layered interruptions, and I think some people just don't want to think that far ahead, or when it comes to playing these decks, they just feel like they have unlimited advantage. There's ways you could beat the deck. There's definitely ways. But I just want to keep this video short. We're going to keep it, try to take it like 10 to 15 minutes, maybe even shorter. But I just want to touch on a couple things when it comes to the ban list coming up, right? So first is the elephant in the room is Snake Eyes, Fire King, and Snake Eyes Pier. So when it comes to the Fire King side of the engine, when it comes to these decks, I personally think that the Fire King stuff in the deck is going to be safe. I know it's the only thing that's really making me think about that is how cheap they are. It came in a structure deck, so as you know, Konami is known for banning cheap cards because it's not making them any money. But the Fire Kings are so utilized right now that they could be selling extra structure decks to get those cards, and that's the only place that they were printed. So in my opinion, I think that the Fire King stuff is going to be safe. But if they happen to touch a card, it'll be Kieran. Obviously, it's the best card in the Fire King strategy. And they won't ban it, but I think it'll go either down to 1 or 2. Just to hurt the consistency of having it in your hand to dodge hand traps. My opinion, right? So next is the Snake Eyes package. And this is going to go for a pure Snake Eye. Pure Snake Eyes, they need their Snake Eye Ash, right? They need to have that card. It's their full combo. So if they're going to hit consistency when it comes to Snake Eyes, it's going to be that card. Either down to 2 or 1, just like how they hit Rescue Ace Airlifter down to 1. I can see them hitting Snake Eye Ash down to 1. But another card that no one's really talking about is Flamebird. I think Flamebird is a broken card. I think it's cracked out of its mind because it has 2 amazing effects. To target any card, any monster card, and either graveyard and just spell and trap zone it is insane by itself, in my opinion. And also the graveyard effect when it gets sent to the graveyard, especially some 2 level 1 Snake Eye monsters. Their effects are not negated, and it's literally the whole gimmick of the Snake Eye deck. So it's just free advantage. So much advantage, in fact, is that your opponent is going to feel like they're so far behind because, Snake Eye Ash adds, Poplar adds, Oak summons. Like, it's just too much, right, to make people feel overwhelmed. So I think the card is just unbelievably cracked. I think being able to spell and trap zone 1 is just free value at no cost. There's no downside to playing Flamebird. There's literally no drawback when it comes to playing that card. So I think if they're going to hit anything in the Snake Eye strategy, either one of those 2 cards needs to be hit. And if it's Flamebird, either bring it down to 1 or ban the card. They're not going to ban it because the card is making the money. Of course, it's part of a deck that is being sold in the most recent set, Phantom Nightmare. So I am like 95% sure they're not going to ban Flamebird. But I can see it get hit to 1, maybe. Just to hurt the consistency of pure Snake Eyes. Now, the next point I want to touch on is the Wanted engine. I believe that this whole engine is going to be safe. I don't think they're going to touch anything in this engine because the engine is making them so much money. And when I say them, I mean Konami. The engine is just making them so much money. Just how the other engine, when it comes to Water Enchantress, right? Rite of Aramecier, the right engine, all of that engine made Konami money, and the engine was never touched. So I think it's the same situation when it comes to the Wanted engine. None of the cards got reprinted yet, so they're all high value, which means people are either going to buy the set to get the card at additional value, or just buy the card outright when it comes to other stores or online websites. So the card is making them so much money. I mean, the whole engine is making them so much money that I don't foresee them breaking that chain. I don't think they're going to go ahead and limit or semi-limit any of these cards simply because of the business side of Yu-Gi-Oh! So they're doing the right thing, in my opinion, business-wise. When it comes to becoming a player or someone who is engaging in the card game, I think it kind of sucks that we have to deal with that, but it's business at the end of the day. If they don't make their money, we cannot play Yu-Gi-Oh! Anymore anyway. So I understand it. The next point I want to bring up is other relevant decks in the meta. Simply Branded and Voiceless Voice. Those are decks that are relevant. Yugioh is kind of a gimmicky deck right now, but it will become meta 100%. So if you haven't picked up the core, I'm not going to say 100%, 90% chance it's going to become meta. So I'm going to pick up the core because I think it's going to be that good. And it's just a general consensus among the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community that Yugioh is going to become good. So that deck, Sprite's still running around here and there, Runic. Relevant decks in the meta, I don't think I have anything to worry about when it comes to the ban list. In fact, I think some might become better, right? Rescue Race might have Airlifter lifted up to 2. I think the only thing that this ban list will do is either try to balance out the playing field, so hit the top decks, or make the bottom decks become a little bit better. They can bring Mathmech Circular back up to 1 or something like that to just create a little bit more diversity and interaction within the meta. So I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next section. Quickly, I want to touch on 3 cards that are pretty relevant in the meta game right now. I'll start with the lowest relevancy and work my way up. So Skill Drain is the lowest relevancy right now, but Fire King can play under Skill Drain. And so can, well, I'm not going to say Fire King, but the Fire decks can play under Skill Drain. All their effects pretty much activate in Graveyard. So if there's like a way to play under Skill Drain, I'm sure people is going to utilize and take advantage of that gimmick in the card game. So that card being at 3 is, in my opinion, a little bit too high. I would bring it down to 1 or just ban the card. It's another floodgate that just reduces interaction between players, which I think is not healthy for the game. So that's my hot take, or I want to say hot take, but that's my take on Skill Drain. I'm sure a lot of people think the same way. But the next card I want to talk about is Super Poly. Super Poly has been seeing more play than Skill Drain. I also think that the card is pretty freaking good. Do I think it should be banned or limited or semi-limited? The answer is no. I think the card is healthy for the game. It creates big blowout moments on stream. It creates entertainment. It makes people go crazy, right? When you see a Super Poly hit the field, everyone freaks out when they're watching a stream or if they're in an event. It's just simply one of those cards that are just so good, and it feels good when you resolve it and you see what happens. And it's a high skill card as well. It's not just simply, okay, you have 2 cards that can be Super Poly now, I'm going to use it now. It takes high skill. You can use your own cards, right? So, and also there's a cost to it. It's a discard 1 card. So I think the card is ultimately fair, and I think it creates an interactive moment in Yu-Gi-Oh! That is just unforgettable, especially if it's a high impact game or a high profile game. People are going to remember when someone got Super Poly and what for and what happened afterwards. So I think the card's healthy for the game. I would keep it at 3. The next card I want to talk about is Summon Limit. This is probably the most relevant card in the meta game right now when it comes to side patterns. Summon Limit is unhealthy for the game. It restricts people's interactiveness with their opponent. Also, it remembers cards that were summoned that turn, even if it's face down. So yeah, you have that surprise factor, but the card is so relevant right now that people have it in their mind. Okay, how many summons do I have this turn? I'm going to assume that face down card after siding is a summon limit. It's just the first thing that comes to people's mind in my experience and in my opinion. especially when I'm playing, I think of that as well, and I'm playing Voiceless Voice, a card that can play under summon limit, so I will play under summon limit if I see a face down card. It's just that impactful. I think the card should be either limited or, which is following their traditional patterns of, you know, Tikaboo and all the other floodgates, or just simply banned. I'm not a big fan of floodgates, so I would ban the card, but, you know, some people can make an argument to put it at 1. Okay, now I have a couple singular cards that I want to touch on quickly in this video. The first card being Calamity. The card is utilized in Centurion, which is a deck that's not very popular right now. However, the card doesn't mean the card is not good, right? If you can make Calamity, you pretty much win the game. And that is a dynamic in Yu-Gi-Oh! That should be avoided. Why does one card win you a game? Where's the interactiveness? What can you do to prevent that? Simply banning Calamity, I think, is the best way to solve that issue. Centurion was not made as Calamity support. It just simply wasn't, right? Centurion is his own archetype. They make their own monsters. They have their own interactions when it comes to utilizing monsters that are in their archetype. Calamity is just an added bonus. That's an unfair gimmick, and simply should be banned. So that's Calamity, in my opinion. The next card I want to talk about is, speaking of gimmicks, Gimmick Puppet. Another card, in my opinion, should be banned. If you don't know what Gimmick Puppet does now, you dodged a bullet, because it's been running around all over the place in Despia. Pretty much why the deck is performing so well, in my opinion, as well, is because of Gimmick Puppet. The card pretty much says you can't special summon monsters for the rest of this turn unless they are gimmick monsters or Gimmick Puppet monsters or something like that. But I know it's a lingering effect, so if you remove it off the field, if you attack a monster that your opponent controls and it dies, you still can't special summon monsters except for gimmick monsters. So, unfair card, something that should not be in Yu-Gi-Oh! And when it's used against you, you just feel bad. You don't want to play the game. You want to just leave. So, cards should not be in the game. In my opinion, ban it. All right, another card is Harpy's Featherstorm. You know where I'm going to go with this. It's a lingering effect that prevents your opponent from activating any monster effects this turn anywhere. In the graveyard, hand, field, banished zone. You can't use monster effects, and it's lingering. Not really ways you can prevent that from happening, especially being a trap card. I'm sure people are going to comment ways to stop it, but in reality, you know, you pretty much go first using that card, and if you set it in your first turn, you activate it during your opponent's draw phase, not really much you can do there unless you have Crossout Designator. All right, and you also play Harpy's Featherstorm. So the card is so strong, it's ban worthy. I will ban it. All right, take that off the list. We don't want to deal with it no more. Flu's running around. Speaking of Flu, the next card I want to talk about is Dimension Shifter. Dimension Shifter is a hand trap that has been utilized and actually shaping the meta. The card is so impactful that decks are coming out of the woodwork to combat Fire King, because Fire King is not good, into Dimension Shifter. So decks like Kashtira and Flu Wanderies have been popping up, more relevant in the metagame, simply because of that card, Shifter. I don't see any other reason why that card will, or those decks will be played in the meta. Besides, I mean, I guess Flu Wanderies has Harpy's Featherstorm, which we just touched on, but the combination of Shifter and Harpy's Featherstorm, you're pretty much losing the game. You can't do nothing about that, right? With these rise of other decks utilizing these broken cards, it really shows what needs to be touched on when it comes to the ban list. So, my opinion with Shifter, I don't want to kill the card. I'm not a big fan of killing hand traps because hand traps can break you. So I do think inherently they have their own downsides. I would put the card to 2. Personally, I would just follow the OCG. I think 2 is a fair number. 1, no one will play it. Look at Gamma, right? Gamma is arguably one of the best hand traps. If it's at 2, people will play it. If it's at 1, no one's going to play it because you have to run the Garnet with it. But when it comes to Dimension Shifter, if you have 1, it would never... most of the time, you're going to be drawing it as a Garnet. It's pretty much a brick in your deck. Because if you don't see it turn 1, if you see it turn 3, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it's going to be broke. It's going to be dead because you're going to have cards in your graveyard. most likely. Right, so that's my opinion on Shifter. I think it should be at 2. Limit the consistency. I think that will bring other decks out of the meta to have room for more decks to come into the meta. So I think putting it at 2 is a great option for Shifter. Okay, so those are my quick little points on the ban list. Like I said, I think it's coming in early April to mid-April. I could definitely be wrong on that, but it's been quite some time. The last ban list we had, I believe, is New Year's. So it's almost 4 months. Typically, I thought it was always 3 months that you get a new ban list, but they might be switching it to, you know, a range of 3 to 5 months or something like that. So keep an eye out for the ban list. This is just my quick little video and opinions on it. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. Also, if you haven't subscribed, watch some other videos, subscribe to the channel, give this one a like. I appreciate you guys stopping in. If you stayed this long in the video, I really do appreciate you guys. All right, man. Take care.